I just really felt impressed to talk about the heart behind it all. And the force behind it all. And last week, what we talked about, the source behind it all. So we're going to be in Luke chapter 15 again. We're going to start at verse 11. Some of you never hear, you heard these scriptures last week. We're going to read through them again. It's not wrong, or Paul said that to the Philippians, it is not grievous for me to repeat the same things, but it is safe. So we're going to look at it, but we're going to look at it as a little different perspective this week. Last week, we kind of looked at it as some sons who just wouldn't come in the house. One made up his mind, I'm going to get my mind right, and I'm going to come in the house. And the other one, we don't know what happened. So it kind of doesn't tell us what happened. So let's just start at verse 11. It said, and he said, and this is Jesus talking, a certain man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he, the father, divided them unto them his living. He had said, just divided it unto the one son, he divided it to both of them. So, and not many days after the younger son gathered all together, he took his journey into a far country, and there he wasted his substance on riotous living. He just went out partying. What he did, he was partying hard. Verse 14 says, when he had spent all, there arose a crisis, there arose a mighty famine in the land, and he began to be in want, or he began to be in need. And he went and he joined himself to a citizen of that country. And he sent, the citizen sent him into the fields to feed the swine. A better way to say that would be that he employed himself to a citizen of that country. He went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, and they gave him the job of going and feeding the swine. So they sent him out there, and we're going to look at that in a little bit, and what that entailed in that culture. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husk of the swine, what they ate, and no man gave to him. He was eating the same things that the pigs were eating. And just put in your mind, a Jewish man in that time, they weren't supposed to be around pigs. And here this man is eating the same thing they're eating. So in their culture, he couldn't get much lower than where he was. So he was eating the same thing, and no man gave unto him, verse 17. And when he came to himself, he had this moment of clarity, I guess. He came to himself, and he said, how many hired servants of my father's have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? He's saying, man, not only are they eating better than me, they got it to spare. Here I am. I can't even get full off what the pigs are eating. I'm perishing with hunger. I will arise, and I'll go to my father, and I will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. See, he's getting this idea in his head. This is what I'm going to do. He's making the plan. This is what I'm going to do. And he arose, and he came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, and he had compassion, and he ran, and he fell on his neck, and he kissed him. And the son said unto his father, Father, I've sinned against heaven, and in your sight I'm no more worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his hand, shoes on his feet, and bring here the fatted calf, and kill it. Let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and he is alive again.
Amen.
He was lost, he is found. and they began to be married. Now the older son, he was in the field. And as he came and drew nigh to the house, he heard the music and the dancing, and he called one of the servants. I think it's interesting that he called a servant instead of just going to see what happened. He called a servant. There's something going on with this older son. So he called the servant and asked about, well, what's going on here? What do these things mean? And he said unto him, thy brother is come, and thy father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him safe and sound. And the older brother was angry. He would not go in. Therefore came his father out and entreated him. Another word for that was he pleaded with him. And he answering to his father, he said, all these years I've served you. I've neither transgressed in any of your commandments. And yet thou never gave me a kid. He's saying, you never even gave me a goat that I might make merry with my friends. I might have a party with my friends. But as soon as this son, which is come, see the heart of the older son here. As soon as he is come, which has devoured thou living with harlots, you have killed for him the fatted calf. And the father answered him, and he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me. You have always been with me. And all that I have is yours. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad. For this your brother was dead, and he is alive. He was lost, and now he is found. So Father, I just thank you for your word. Lord, I ask that you just continue to be with us today. And may you touch our hearts today on this Easter day, Father. May we leave here closer to you. If we're far off from you, I pray that we come to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure you know this, this story is called the story of the prodigal son. That's what if you look in your Bible, you have a door Bible, it probably says in big letters, the prodigal son, and then you go through this narrative. According to the American Heritage Dictionary, prodigal means this: recklessly wasteful, extravagant. Recklessly wasteful and extravagant. Now, the story of the son, the prodigal son, is the story of a son who was recklessly wasteful, having convinced his father to give him his inheritance just a little bit early. But he'd go ahead and give me my inheritance. And he squandered it all before he decided to come back home. Fast living. You could say he was fast, but I've read this story a bunch of times, and I've seen it from a different perspective last week when we did it. And I've read it a lot of times, and I've always looked at the sons. Like, there's a son. This son was a mess. There's this other son staying home doing everything right, except his heart's a mess too. Look how he's angry with his father. But notice how it begins. Jesus said there was a man who had two sons. I think the Lord may have been making the man the subject, and the sons were the object. There was a man who had two sons. See, he's the subject in the matter. Now, I miss that all the time. I never know, but I do. But the man is the subject. Who is the subject? The father. The story is about the father. It's about a father who is extravagant. It's about a father who's actually reckless and almost wasteful with his love for his children. And we're going to see that. If you study it carefully, you'll discover that this story can tell you so much about who God is. This story can, it probably one of the greatest stories in the Bible that shows you really the heart of God for his children. And if you really want to know how God feels about you, if you want to know how much you are worth in God's eyes, I think somebody will get mad about something. If you really want to know what you're worth in God's eyes, if you've ever wondered, is there any significance for me in this big world, this vast, whatever universe we're in, then I believe that God has sent you here today because this story is for you. It's for you. Because the story answers the question, how does God feel about me? If you wondered that, the story is going to answer the question for you. How does God feel about me? Same way he felt about that son who ran off, same way he felt about the older son. He feels the same about those sons. How does God feel about them? All right, the story is a story that Jesus tells, and when we read scripture with it, it's very dangerous just to take one story or this scripture or that scripture and just make a theology or a doctrine out of it. We need to look at the whole context of what was going on and what Jesus was saying. So it was the third story he was telling in a sequence of stories. And it was in response to some muttering Pharisees. They were muttering because they didn't like the riffraff that Jesus was hanging out with. He was hanging out with the tax collectors and all this and that. So he gonna tell them. The Pharisees didn't like it. One, because Jesus was a fellow rabbi. And that was a teacher of the law and of the scripture. Now, you're making all of us rabbis look bad because you're associating with this riffraff. Kind of see their hearts here. So they didn't like this very much. And this muttering and this whispering and this carrying on, it doesn't sit real well with Jesus. So he turns around and he tells them about a shepherd who had 100 sheep and he lost one. We all know the story there. He'll go after the one. Okay? Then he tells about this woman who had 10 coins and she lost one of those. And then he comes to this parable that we just read about a certain man who had 2 sons and lost one. Okay? So we see that Jesus he's up to something here. He wants them to realize something very important. And I think what he wants them to realize, Brother Harry, is the heart of his Father. He tells them. So the story of the Father here is told in kind of some different scenes. You know, you had the scene of the inheritance being divided and all this stuff. So at the very beginning, they're at the family homestead. And it's about the father dividing his property between the 2 sons. Scene 2, the younger son is in a faraway land where he runs to escape. Scene 3 describes the interaction between the father and the younger son. When the younger son returns. Scene 4, the older son is in the field. 5, the older son. What does he do? Does he return? Or does? I mean, to understand that, we're going to have to look into a little bit of their culture at that time. What does he do? So, scene 1, the father is dividing his property. Now, the young son asks the father to divide his property so he can have his inheritance. And the father does. Now, that is so scandalous right there. If you really know the culture of that time, that is something. Now, at first glance, we may be sick because in our mind, that probably isn't nothing to us. I mean, people won't, we live in a society where it's all about me most of the time nowadays. But here, this was a big thing. And you may just think that this dad was really cool and wanted his son to have what, you know what I mean? Or you just may think that the dad was somebody that could be walked on, like the son could walk on, like the dad was just putting in his hand or something. But that's not so much the case. And if we think like that, we're kind of missing the point. Because that, to everyone in that area who heard that, that would have been just horrible. Like I said, it would have been scandalous. No one in the Middle East would have made such a request of their father at that time. It wouldn't have happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen, because we know everything Jesus said was true. But to say that to your father was so bad. Because it was just like saying, I wish you were dead. There's no difference. When he asked him to buy the inheritance, I wish you were dead. Because he didn't get it. I mean, they didn't divide the inheritance till the father was dead. He was the younger son. Really, he was only going to get a third. The older son got 2 portions. And he would have been the one running everything. That's how the culture operated then. So this author, Ken Bailey, who lived in that region of the world for some time, wrote this. For over 15 years, I have been asking people from all walks of life, from Morocco to India, Turkey, Sudan, this Middle Eastern culture, about the implications of the son's request for his inheritance while the father is still living. The answer has almost always been the same. And here's how it goes. Has anyone ever made such a request in your village? Never. Could anyone ever make such a request? Impossible. If anyone did, what would happen? The father would beat him. Why? Because this request means he wants the father to die. Why? This request means he wants the father to die. One Middle Eastern writer wrote this. The shepherd in his search for the sheep, the woman in her search for the coin, do not do anything out of the ordinary beyond what anyone in their place would have done. But the actions the father takes in the third story are unique, marvelous, divine actions which have not been done by any father in the past. There's a uniqueness to the story. Divide your inheritance so I could have my share of the estate. And to everyone's amazement, he does. He does. Are y'all tracking? Are y'all following me? Y'all tracking? Okay. The next words of this story go like that. Not long after. So he didn't take off right away. Not long after. Not long after, the younger son got together all that he had, set out for a distant country, where there he squandered his wealth on wild living. Now, most Westerners may think that he left so quickly because he was a party animal, plain and simple, and being in the same town with his conservative man might have cramped his style. But that wasn't the case. How are you going to carry all these goats and all this stuff with you? Your portion. He had to liquidate his inheritance. He had to liquidate it. He had to find a buyer for his portion of the family farm, portion of the family jewels, portion of the livestock. And the only people he could sell it to were people that knew. People in the same area, in the same village. And I can imagine what he was greeted with. Probably, people were probably amazed that he would ask the father such a thing. Hey, I'm trying to sell these rings or something that belong to my father. How horrific of you. Why would you do such a thing? That's probably what he was faced with. That's probably what he was confronted with. Think about how the people treated him. Now we're talking about people that would tie you up and stone you to death. That was the culture then. So at every turn, and as the storm mounts, he felt more and more pressure. I got to go. So imagine the rejection he felt in his life. Maybe he's out there riding his living trying to cover up all this stuff. Maybe he's drinking and boozing and hiring harlots and all this stuff because he's trying to feel this, what he has done and what he has caused others to look at him as. So he leaves, and as soon as he sold all of these goods, by now the villagers are probably openly antagonistic towards him, I would imagine. Now this is out of the culture at the time that I'm getting on this. It's just painting a picture of what this most likely looked like. So as soon as all the negotiations are done, transaction complete, the son heads out of town to a faraway country. In that faraway country, he starts to descend into his own personal hell. That's what happened. Imagine, you're living it up, your father's a nobleman. It says that because he had to, we know that because of his rings and his robe and all this stuff. He had an inheritance to divide. If you weren't a nobleman or something, you wouldn't have had that. So we know his father is a nobleman, and he went from that to living in the pig pen. From that to eating the same thing the pigs did. If I go back home, all these people know what I did. There's so many times that we don't want to face things because of the same feelings. And it keeps driving us down into the pig pen. Driving us into the pig pen. So, it says he squandered his wealth in wild living. He's in this faraway country. And he wasted it. And you know what? The citizens of that faraway country, they know that too. Mm-hmm. They too are probably unimpressed with this young man. Probably very unimpressed with him. And here's why we know. A Middle Eastern wouldn't have just told you to get your stuff and go. They wouldn't have done that. Not in that culture. It would have been against how they were supposed to live. What they would do is they would give you a job so terrible that you would leave. They would offer you something so bad that you would leave. So we can see he was offered something that went completely against. He wasn't even supposed to be around pigs. He wasn't supposed to touch a pig. And here he is, he's offered this. And amazingly, he accepts it. He probably felt like I had no choice. I had no choice. Look what I've done to my father. There's no way I can go back to that village. Everybody knows what a piece of dirt, or however you want to say it, I am. I wasn't going to say it, but you know what I'm. I have to accept this. So when the son asked for the job, one of the citizens offered to let him become a pig herder. It's a job no Jewish boy who had an ounce of respect for himself would have took. But this young man doesn't have any. He accepts it. It's a terrible job. It doesn't even pay enough to fight off the hunger that the guy has. He's still starving. He's still hungry. But now he starts to think. He realizes he can't go back home and ask to live in the family as a son. Well, that's what he thinks. I can't do this. Maybe I can go ask for a job. Maybe I can go back and ask for my father to hire me. That way, if he works hard, saves money, maybe he will be able to earn some kind of sonship back one day. There's so many of us that think like that, and I don't even know if we realize that if we do it right, if we do this and do that and do this and do that, maybe we'll be accepted. Well, what does the father do? He comes up with a plan. He'll go home, he'll admit he's a fool, and instead of asking to be reinstated as a son, he'll ask to be hired as a servant. Something the father won't accept. And even if the father would accept this, he'd have to face the wrath of the villagers, all the other people around, all the other servants. You know, anybody who lives in a foreign country would know that it would be difficult to return home unless you had succeeded and made something in your life. And this guy not only didn't succeed, he's a miserable failure. He got about as low as you can go. But his real problem is, how will the villagers feel about him? They hated him when he left. He had disgraced them all by wishing that his father was dead. And then he disposed of all of his family's property. And to that, he lost all his money to people that the Jews despised, the Gentiles in a faraway land. He then took from his father and pretty much gave it all to them. He will simply have to endure the mocking, scorning, shaming that they'll give him, because he's going to have to walk and meet some of them on the way to the Father's house. No way around. He's going to have to face it. And that's where the next scene happens. The younger son returns. This is where the father comes into play in the story. Lord, help us here. The father, because of his experience, I believe he knows two things. He knows that the son, when he left, was very immature. He knows this. So he knows that the son probably really ain't done much with his life. Okay? He probably knows that. And he knows the son's character. My son, pretty much, told me, I wish you were dead. I want my stuff. Why should I wait till you die to be able to enjoy what's mine? The second thing the father knows is the village will not treat him well. Since his departure, all the town people have probably openly told the father. I mean, one thing in Middle Eastern culture, they don't hold back what they think at all. They will tell you quick what they think. And I'm sure the father's heard plenty of, how could you do such a thing? The father knows this. The father knows everything. The father does a few things that would be considered outrageous in Middle Eastern society. The first thing he does is he runs. You may say, well, I know people who run all the time. Especially, it's starting to warm up. You don't see people running all over the place. They want to be healthy and stuff. But when word comes to him that his son has been seen on the outskirts of the village, when he's seen he's from far off, Scripture says the father runs to him. Runs to him. Instead of letting his son run the gauntlet, instead of letting his son run through that village by himself to be scorned, the father runs to him. He's not going to let him suffer that by himself. You see. One ancient Jewish writer writes about the running saying this. Let me back up. A nobleman with a robe would never have run in that culture. It was a disgrace. Don't ask me why, I'm not Middle Eastern, but it was a disgrace in that culture. And not only does he runs down the road, he runs, people see him, but it's disgraceful. A Jewish writer wrote this. He said, a man's manner of walking tells you what he is. Another scholar writes, it is so very undignified in Eastern eyes for any elderly man to run. It is undignified. Aristotle wrote this. Great men never run in public. Now, I don't know what that has to do with anything, but that's what he wrote, okay? So, but here the Father is running. Here the Father does, and Jesus explains why. But while he was still a long way off, his Father saw him and was filled with compassion.
Yes, hallelujah.
He was filled with compassion. He knew what the young man was about to have to endure. and he was filled with compassion. The Father deliberately run to him, probably through the village. He knows he's creating a spectacle. He knows what he's doing is going to attract a crowd. People live pretty close together back then. They know what's going to happen. He does it anyway. Imagine that for a moment. The son. I'll go. I'll tell him, I've been a fool. I'll go. I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you, Father. I'll go. I'll ask him to hire me. I'll be one of his servants. And here the son is. And he sees his father running towards him. He sees him running towards him. Imagine how the son's heart felt at that time. Look what my father is. He knows there's no way he can get to his father without enduring scorn. He has to get to the Father in order to become a servant. So he sets his jaw and he walks the last few miles towards that town. And sure enough, at first sighting on the outskirts of town, word starts spreading. People are going to gather. He's about to endure some of the worst moments of his life next to that big tree. As he comes to the edge of the village, he expects to probably see rocks and jeers and everything else. But instead, what he sees coming are the ankles of his father. He sees he's falling. Which it was undignified to do that. It was undignified for a man to run in a robe and expose his ankles and the bottom of his legs. But that's what he sees. And rather than experience the hostility he deserves for what he's done, he finds a demonstration of the love of his Father. Words can't express what this scene really looks like. It really can't. Here's a man who knows I'm taking a chance on getting flogged. And the Father knows this is about to happen. And he runs and saves him. He runs. The Father runs. The second thing the Father does is he kisses him. The text said he ran to his son, he threw his arms around him, and he kissed him. Luke 15:20. They're embracing eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder. In his mind, the son had placed himself coming home. First, he kissed the Father's hand. Then he kissed his feet. Then he'd say, will you hire me? I've sinned. But the Father won't let him. The Father got him, see. He won't let him do that. The Son can't bend, he can't stoop. All he can do is accept the love of the Father. The Greek word used here to describe what the Father does when it says kiss is kataphilou. I think that's how you say it. K-A-T-A-F-P-H-I-L-E-W. Literally, it means to kiss again and again and again and again. That's what the Father's doing. He's kissing his Son again and again and again and again. Picture yourself in that scene. You've wronged God. You know it. I've wronged God. I know it. You don't need to grovel and admit all you're wrong and make all sorts of promises. All you need to do is start walking towards him. He's going to run to you. So you approach him, you got the whole speech planned out like this guy, only he doesn't let his son do it. He doesn't let his son do it. Look, this is so powerful right here. You see, the son, we know what he planned to do when he saw his father. Father, I've sinned against you, heaven. He done made his mind. This is what he's saying to himself before he even starts going. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. See his plan? He admit his guilt, asked to become a servant in his father's household. Now, in Luke 15:21, we see what the son actually said to the father. Father, I've sinned against heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be your son. What's missing there? His request to be a servant. Why is it missing? Because he's overwhelmed by what the Father just did. He's overwhelmed by that love. He can't ask to be a servant. He knows the Father is not going to allow it. His plan to earn his way back to the Father's favor. He never intended to. He never intended to ask his Father to accept him back just as he was. That wasn't his plan. Well, when the Father runs and kisses him, how could he not accept his Father's love for him? Third thing the Father does is call for a robe to be put on his son. Here are his exact words. Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Now, who owned the best robe in the family? The Father. The Father and Son are still standing on the edge of the village, and the Father wants the whole village to know that he has accepted his Son. He wants everyone to know. So he sends his servant to get the best robe so the Son can wear it as he walks through the village, so they can see him wearing the robe. Fourth thing he does, he calls for a ring. Put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. The ring is a signet ring, and it's the ring the Father would use to sign documents, which means, I trust you, son. I trust you. You're now an empowered member of the family. The sandals are a sign he's a free man. You know, in that culture back then, Brother Trent, servants didn't wear shoes. They didn't wear sandals or shoes. Only free men. It's a sign of a free man. Finally, the Father says, bring the fatted calf and kill it. Not the fatted goat, not the sheep, not the chicken. The calf, live calf. Last week we talked about that the fatted calf would eat the best. They would feed it the best of everything. Like, it ate the better slop than the pigs did, which they didn't have pigs, or the goats, you know what I'm saying. It ate the best of everything because it was for a special occasion. Mm-hmm. Not only that, though, a goat doesn't have enough meat to feed the whole village. You see what the Father's doing? The chicken don't have enough meat to feed the whole village, to have a party to invite everybody. But a cow does.
That's right.
A cow does. So what he's doing here is he not only took the shame of the Son, not only put his robe on him, so people would know, I have accepted my Son. Not only did he put the ring on him and said, my son has the authority which he walked away from. Not only did he put the shoes on him and say, he's a nobleman just like me. He ain't going to be a servant. He's saying, all of y'all come out. We're going to have a party for my son. Ain't that amazing? He's inviting the whole village to share in his joy. He doesn't want the Son to only to be reconciled to him. He wants everybody to have a relationship with his Son. Ain't that something? You can see the gospel there. Mm-hmm. You can see the gospel right there. This is a story that no one in that time would have ever thought read. One commentator wrote this. He said, for Palestinian listeners, initially the Father would have had to be a symbol of God. Then as the story progresses, The father comes out of the house and in a dramatic way demonstrates unexpected love publicly in humiliation. It's one of them stories that are almost too good to be true for that culture at the time. The word gospel, besides out of context of scripture, is only found wrote twice in historical documents anywhere else. And what it actually meant was too good to be true. That was the actual meaning of it, too good to be true. You see what Jesus is doing with this story as he tells it? Y'all haven't even got the main part yet. Here's what he's doing, Steve. Here's what he's doing. He's communicating to every person who ever wanted to take a step towards God how significant we are to him. How God feels about us. He doesn't just wait for us, he runs to us when he sees us. You see, the Son took a step, and now God is running. He is running. I don't know how much shame and humiliation I should have been through, Steve, but I didn't have to. A bunch. A bunch of y'all don't know about it. I should have went through in the past not too long ago. It's because I have a loving Father, just like you. He doesn't just wait for us, he runs. He doesn't let us bear the shame of living our lives the way that Son did. He bears it for us. He kisses us, he puts his robe on us, he puts his ring on us, his sandals on our feet. He kills the fatted calf to celebrate. Scene 4 is about the older son. The older son hasn't left home. He hasn't went anywhere. But if you read the story carefully, you'll discover he may not have left home, but he's left the Father. He may not have left home, but he has left the Father. As the scene opens, where is the older son? He's out working in the field. Now there are two mentions of the older son in the opening of Jesus' story. As Jesus begins the story, he says, there's a man who had two sons. The younger said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. You see, he's mentioned twice there. Now, in the first sentence, he's mentioned as one of the two sons. In the second, he's mentioned as receiving his share also. He received his share also. So the older son owns everything that him and the father now live on. The father is living on the older son's property. It belongs to him. As the older son's coming in from the field, he hears music, he gets a report from one of the servants, your brother has returned, he's safe, there's a party going on. What's the older brother's response? He's mad. He becomes angry. He refuses to join the party, which would have been a severe insult to his father. That would have been a severe insult because in Jewish culture, the older son was supposed to be the one standing there welcoming everybody to the party. So it would have been a big insult to his father not to join the party. If you read further on, you'll find out in his heart the older son had distanced himself from the father, just as the younger son. He says to the father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you. I've never disobeyed you. You ain't even gave me a goat so I could celebrate with my friends. Don't he own everything already? Don't he own it all already, Brother Trent? You never even give me a goat. Ain't that something? Look, all these years I've been slaves for you. I've never disobeyed the Lord. Yet you gave me a goat so I could celebrate with my friends. Them two statements tell us something about the older son and his distance from his father. First of all, he doesn't think of himself as a son. He owns it all already. Yet he's thinking the father don't even care enough about him to give him the goat. But you own it. Second, in that culture at the time, it was important that they had the same circle of people they had, who the father hung out with, the older son would hang out with too. That would be his circle of friends. But he's saying, you hadn't even gave me a goat so I could go be with my friends. You see, he's distanced himself from his father. Are y'all following? It can get very, very deep here. The scripture is really very deep, but he's distanced himself. He's mad because the father had never given him anything to throw a party. In his mind, his friends are not the same. He doesn't want to party with his dad or be friends with his younger brother or any of that. He's developed his own social web, and the father, he has nothing to do with it. But the sad plus amazing thing about the son is that he felt deprived by the father because the father had never given him a calf, a chicken, a goat. Jeez. Just ponder this in your mind. How many times have you seen somebody blessed and you've done it all right? And you felt to yourself, you've never done that for me. I have. But what happened when the younger son left? The older son got his share too. So the father says, my son, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. I already gave it to you. All these years it's been yours. I've already gave it to you. I've already gave it to you. There's so much. He's already gave it to you. I've already gave it to you. So the older son's distancing him. He refuses to go to the party. What does the father do? Same thing he did for the younger son. Exact same thing. He humiliates himself by leaving the party and going out to the son to entreat his son. Now this is where it really gets interesting. Jesus, like all good Jewish storytellers of his day, tells this story in a classic way. Just bear with me a minute, I'm going to try to explain it. All stories from this region, they would do it in what they call a structure called chiasm. And it was like this. Well, let's look at the younger son. Like this. A son is lost. Goods are wasted in wild living. Everything's lost. The great sin, he's feeding pigs for a Gentile. Total rejection. Nobody would help him. Remember? He changes his mind. He repents in his heart. I'll go back to my father. He is totally accepted. The great repentance. I am unworthy. Y'all see the gospel here? You see the gospel. I am unworthy. Everything gained, goods wasted while partying, a son is found. Now, let's look at the older son real quick, all right? A son is far off. Your brother is safe. We're having a feast. Father comes to reconcile. Older son, this is how you treated me compared to how you treated him. Father tries to reconcile. Your brother is safe. What is the outcome? What does the older brother do? He never says. Why? Why, Brother Trent? He says what the younger the younger son, it says what happened to his heart. Why not the older? Remember, Jesus is telling a story. He's telling a story. There was a sheep herder, had 100 sheep. A sheep herder who had 100 sheep. One gets lost. I'm going to find him. You'll go find him. A woman. She lost 10 coins. No, she had 10 coins. She lost one. She goes to find him. Father had 2 sons. One took off, come back, repented. Here's what happened. Then there's another son. Here's how he acted. Jesus never tells. He never tells how to live. You know why? Because the people he's talking to are the older sons. They're the older sons. Clearly, in their minds, they were the older sons. They were the ones who had stayed around and tried to obey and serve God. But in their hearts, they were far off. They didn't want to come to the party. They didn't want to celebrate that that sinners like tax collectors and prostitutes and all them were turning their lives around and going to God. They didn't want to celebrate that. They wanted to be like, we got everything right. That's how it was. That's why. He was telling them, you're just as far off from God as that guy was. That's what he's saying. You sat on your high horse all this time. Look how far off you are. Jesus saying the younger son understands and accepts he was far off. And he's been found. He admits he was lost. The father comes out to him, outrageously welcomes him back in the house. The older son, he's far off too. He's proud because he knows he's really not that bad of a guy. He knows he's not that bad of a guy. He's mad at the father, just like you're mad at me, and you refuse to come in. So the father is begging. He's entreating you right now. Come in the house. Celebrate that these who are far off are coming. See, the point is that the Father loves all his children so much that Jesus was willing to suffer and be humiliated. He was willing to suffer and be humiliated, just like the Father was. You see, there's the gospel in the prodigal son. The Son of God. He didn't spend his living on right. He didn't come and spend everything on righteous living. But he left his father's home. He came and lived in a pig pen so he could bring us back into the Father's house. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, I hope you got something out of that.
Amen.
But he wants you to come on. He wants you to come on. No matter if you're the wayward son, or if you're the one sitting in the synagogue, in the church, thinking to yourself, well, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? There's nobody too far off from the Lord. Nobody too far off.
Amen.
And I'm here to tell you, we can sit in these pews every Sunday morning and be as far off as that guy that was living in the big tent. If not worse.
Yeah.
If not worse. He just wants us to come into the house. To sit, fellowship with him. That's what the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ was all about. so we could come into the house. Amen. Brother Trent, will you close out for us and pray, please?